Joining us now is Associate Professor Chung Jae-yen from the Department of Political Science at the National University of Singapore. The Professor Chung, based on the outcome of the summit and also what was said during the APEC dinner yesterday, is this a sign of a thaw in relations or just dialing back to a somewhat familiar status quo?
So I think it's a stabilization of the relationship. I don't think it's a fundamental thaw or change, but momentum for more stable, manageable ties is a good thing. Maybe down the line, it could lead to perhaps more of an opening up between the two sides, but that remains to be seen.
There are still deep divisions on key bilateral issues, such as the crises in the Middle East and Ukraine, as well as Taiwan. Most immediately, though, Biden pressed President Xi on China's influence over Iran regarding the Israel-Gaza conflict. Could and will China do more?
So, the PRC has an interest in maintaining stability in the Middle East. So, what we'll really have to see is how much leverage they have and how much political capital they're willing to spend with Tehran. It's right now that's less clear. And in fact, if you look at the general situation in the Middle East, that it's pretty volatile and things are difficult to control. On other things like military-to-military contact, there's some debate on this, actually. One school of thought claims that, this is a path to more predictable ties where we can see an avoidance of accidents and a decrease in risk. Another says, the military-to-military talks, they may be good on some level, but if there's a crisis, what you could see is with the trawler incident between the PRC and Japan in 2010, or the EP3 incident, that the PRC side may not have people who are empowered to pick up the phone. A third school of thought actually says that maybe what will happen is that the PRC side will start blaming the U.S. for any lack of progress. So as you can see, the different lines of thinking suggest that there's still a lot of uncertainty.
And Mr. Biden touted progress with Mr. Xi, but could that dictator comment that he made off the cuff, could that trigger a new diplomatic backlash?
Well, President Biden has, uttered those statements about General Secretary Xi before. So I guess there may be some happiness, but I guess it's also a test of how much Beijing wants to improve ties with the U.S. If they really wish to move forward, it's a term, they'll probably move past it. This is what politicians do, right? That they sometimes will say things and they'll disagree with things, but if they want to, they can probably move past it. So again, it's something to watch because I think it's a useful test to see how much Beijing is willing to weather.
And China reiterated again that Taiwan is central to its core interests. There's an election there in January. What is the main way that will test the U.S.-China relationship and this warming of ties?
So I think the most obvious one would be to see if there's a dialing back of the military activity in the air and at sea near Taiwan. I think that will be a big indicator. So we can see maybe a decrease in frequency, if we see a de-escalation in terms of the types of equipment being deployed, that could send a signal. But essentially, the PRC pressure on Taiwan, it's mindful of the elections. I think they want to create a situation where a more pro-Beijing party is able to win not just the presidency, but also take more seats in the legislature. So I guess, Beijing is caught between trying to continue to put pressure on Taiwan. They're afraid that Taiwan may move further in a direction that they don't want. But also to send a signal of assurance, not just to people in the United States and the U.S. government, but also people in Taiwan as well. So it's again another area that's a test. So I think what we see with the meetings is that we have several markers to look at in the months going forward, where the real progress can be measured.
The reports have been pointing to Mr. Xi in a shakier political position than a year ago, no thanks to domestic pressures and slowing economy. Could this serve as an opportunity or disruption in the relations going forward?
So, yeah, we've seen the reports coming up from the PRC economy, and certainly I think that is creating some encouragement for State Chairman Xi to be a little bit more accommodating. But the PRC and the Chinese Communist Party have a history of going into a lull when things aren't in their favor, so they can regroup and reorganize. They could be in that sort of phase right now. But again, basically with the military to military talks and so on, it is a tacit acceptance on the PRC side that there needs to be some sort of guardrails to the U.S.-China competition, which in effect is a acceptance of the U.S. position, even though they're keen not to use that language. So we'll see, because it's also possible that a more difficult situation may force State Chairman Xi's hand. He may feel that he needs to demonstrate strength. So again, it's a pretty delicate situation, I think, in the PRC, and one that I think everybody will be watching. It's difficult because there's so little transparency within Beijing at this point in time.
And for smaller nations in Asia and Southeast Asia particularly, a better relationship between the two superpowers will be welcome. Do you see it helping with the South China Sea disputes, particularly the opening of communication lines between the two militaries?
So the opening of communication lines, I think, is helpful in terms of potentially reducing the risk of escalation. But this is a U.S. PRC arrangement. We also see that the PRC is putting pressure on Southeast Asian claimants, such as the Philippines, notably, but also Vietnam. And also they are active in waters claimed by Malaysia. So whether those U.S. PRC arrangements then spill over to PRC behavior towards other claimants, that really remains to be seen. And I think for states in Southeast Asia, abiding by the rule of law as generally understood, abiding by UNCLOS, all those are important. Beijing has not yet, accepted. They continue to see the arbitral tribunal as something that is illegitimate. So, that needs to shift. But that's not strictly a U.S. PRC issue.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your time and your insight this morning. Professor Chong Jia-Yin, Associate Professor from the Department of Political Science at the National University of Singapore.